The cave mouth opens before you, a dark void against the twilight sky. The air carries the scent of wood smoke, earth, and something else, a musky odor of animal hide and sweat. This is home, at least for now. Your stomach growls, reminding you that it's been nearly a day since you last ate. A handful of berries and what little meat remained from the small deer your band managed to bring down 3 days ago. Tomorrow, you must hunt again, or the hunger that has become your constant companion will only grow stronger. Your feet, calloused from years of walking the unforgiving earth without modern footwear, carry you inside where several figures huddle around a small fire. No one speaks much. Energy conservation is instinctive when food is scarce. Your younger brother nurses a wound on his arm, a gash from yesterday's failed hunt when a wild boar charged unexpectedly from the underbrush. With no antibiotics, no proper medical care, the angry red line spreading from the wound suggests an infection that might claim his life in days. This is not a camping trip. This is not a temporary excursion into nature from which you can retreat to civilization when things get uncomfortable. This is existence during the Stone Age, a period spanning roughly 3.4 million years, ending just 5,000 years ago with the advent of metalworking. For 99.6% of human history, this brutal, unforgiving reality was all our ancestors knew. The modern human, accustomed to climate control, readily available food, clean water at the turn of a tap, and immediate medical attention, can scarcely comprehend the harshness of Stone Age life. We vacation in wilderness areas that are typically monitored, mapped, and maintained. We rough it with equipment engineered for safety and comfort. We play at survival with the knowledge that help is usually just a phone call away. But the true Stone Age experience offered no such safety nets. It was a daily battle against starvation, predation, exposure, disease, and injury. A battle that the average modern human, despite our technological advances and accumulated knowledge, would almost certainly lose within hours, not days. This historical deep dive explores the brutal, uncompromising reality of Stone Age existence through the lens of modern understanding. Drawing on archaeological evidence, anthropological studies, and evolutionary biology, we will reconstruct what daily life was truly like for our ancestors. Through narrative reconstructions based on scientific evidence, we'll follow individuals through typical days in various Stone Age contexts, from the early Paleolithic period, beginning 2.5 million years ago, to the later Mesolithic and Neolithic transitions. Most importantly, we'll examine why you, a modern human with all your contemporary knowledge and advantages, would likely perish quickly if suddenly transported back to this era. This isn't merely an academic exercise in historical appreciation. Understanding our ancestors' struggles for survival provides crucial insights into our own biology, psychology, and social structures. The adaptations that allowed our species to endure through the Stone Age remain embedded in our bodies and minds, influencing our behaviors, preferences, fears, and capabilities in ways we rarely recognize. The world of the Stone Age was not merely our past, it was the crucible that forged humanity itself. And its lessons about survival, resilience, and adaptation have never been more relevant than in our rapidly changing modern world. Let us begin our journey back to a time when survival was everything, and every day lived was a triumph against overwhelming odds. Grunting awake in the dim pre-dawn light, Kren feels the familiar ache in his joints, a bone-deep cold that has settled during the night, despite the animal hides covering his body. At 35 winters, he is considered an elder in his small band. Few live to see 40. The shelter, a simple lean-to constructed of branches and animal skins, provides minimal protection against the elements. During the night, the temperature dropped close to freezing, and the morning dew has dampened everything, despite their efforts to stay dry. There is no time to ease into wakefulness, no comfort of a warm shower or cup of coffee. The first priority is reviving the fire that has died down overnight. Without matches or lighters, this task requires skill and patience. Kren takes a partially burned stick from last night's fire and some dried moss he keeps in a small pouch made from rabbit skin. Using a fire bow, a simple device made from a flexible branch, a cord of sinew, and a wooden spindle, he begins the laborious process of creating enough friction to generate an ember. After several minutes of intense effort, his shoulders burning from exertion, a small wisp of smoke appears. Carefully, meticulously, he transfers the nascent ember to the waiting tinder nest of moss and dried grass. Bending close, his breath controlled and measured, he blows gently until the ember grows and finally catches the tinder. The small flame that results represents the difference between life and death on this cold morning. Around him, the rest of the band stirs. There are 12 of them in total, 3 adult males including Kren, 4 adult females, and 5 children of various ages. One of the women, Lara, is heavily pregnant and has been moving more slowly in recent days. Everyone knows the danger this represents. Childbirth in the Stone Age is one of the most perilous moments in a woman's life, with maternal mortality rates estimated at 25 to 30%. If Lara survives, her infant will face even worse odds. Approximately 50% of children die before reaching adulthood. There is no breakfast waiting. The band finished the last of their food stores the previous evening, which means today must be productive or they will all go hungry again. Hunger is not an occasional inconvenience, but a constant companion, waxing and waning with the success of their foraging and hunting efforts. As the sun rises fully over the horizon, the band separates into smaller groups with distinct tasks. There is no formal leadership structure, but experience and skill determine who does what. Kren and the other 2 adult males, Tark and Noel, prepare for a hunting expedition. Their weapons are simple but effective. Spears tipped with painstakingly crafted stone points, bound to wooden shafts with sinew and tree resin. Each man carries a spare spear point, as breaking a weapon could mean going hungry. Before leaving, they study the ground around their camp, looking for tracks and signs of animal movement. They've noticed deer droppings and broken branches indicating a small herd passed nearby during the night. Following these signs requires intense concentration and intimate knowledge of animal behavior, knowledge accumulated through generations of observation and passed down through oral tradition. Meanwhile, the women and older children prepare for gathering expeditions. Contrary to popular misconceptions about rigid gender roles in prehistoric societies, archaeological evidence suggests considerable flexibility in labor division. While men typically hunted larger game due to physical advantages in upper body strength, women were responsible for gathering plant foods, hunting smaller animals, fishing, and maintaining the camp. Activities that often provided the majority of calories for the group. Lara, despite her pregnancy, joins the gathering party. She cannot afford to rest. In the Stone Age, contributing to the group's survival is non-negotiable, regardless of personal discomfort. She carries a digging stick, a simple tool hardened in fire, and a woven basket made from plant fibers. Her knowledge of edible plants is extensive, representing years of learning from older women, personal experimentation, and careful observation. Mistaking a poisonous plant for an edible one could mean death for herself and her unborn child. The children are not idle. From the youngest age capable of walking independently, children in Stone Age societies participated in subsistence activities. Today, the older children join the gathering expedition while a 7-year-old girl named Sari stays behind to tend the fire and watch the two youngest children, her 3-year-old brother and a 2-year-old orphaned after her mother died from an infected wound last winter. For a modern human suddenly transported to this reality, the morning would already present insurmountable challenges. Fire making. Without the ability to create fire using primitive methods, a modern person would likely spend hours unsuccessfully attempting to ignite a flame, resulting in wasted energy and increasing cold as the day progresses. Direction and navigation. Lacking GPS, maps, or even a compass, navigating even short distances through unmarked wilderness would be disorienting and dangerous. Identifying food sources. Most modern humans cannot reliably distinguish between edible and poisonous plants in the wild, a knowledge gap that could prove fatal within the first 24 hours. Physical conditioning. The constant movement, bending, carrying, and manual labor required from dawn would quickly exhaust someone accustomed to a sedentary lifestyle. Waste management. The absence of modern sanitation would immediately present hygienic challenges unfamiliar to contemporary people, potentially leading to contamination of water sources and food. Kren, Tark, and Noel have been tracking the deer herd for nearly 3 hours. Movement through the dense forest is slow and deliberate. Every step must be placed carefully to minimize noise. Every change in wind direction must be noted to prevent their scent from alerting the prey. The physical demands are immense, not the artificial exertion of a modern gym workout, but the total body engagement of moving through uneven terrain while carrying weapons and remaining constantly alert. Finally, they spot the herd, 6 deer grazing in a small clearing. The hunters separate, communicating with subtle hand gestures developed over years of working together. There are no rangefinders to calculate distance, no scopes to magnify targets. Judgment of range, wind direction, and the anticipated movement of the prey comes from experience alone. The hunters must approach within 20 to 30 meters to have any chance of a successful throw with their spears. This requires painfully slow movement, sometimes taking several minutes to advance a single meter. A twig snapping underfoot or a sudden shift in the wind could alert the deer and send them bounding away, wasting hours of tracking and precious energy. When they are finally in position, the attack must be coordinated. Their first weapons thrown, the hunters immediately begin running, not to escape, but to pursue. This is persistence hunting, a technique used by early humans that relies on our species' unique capacity for endurance running and thermoregulation. While most mammals can outrun humans in a sprint, few can maintain speed over long distances, especially in the heat of the day when humans' ability to sweat gives them a critical advantage. The initial spear throws wound one deer, and the hunters begin their pursuit, tracking the blood trail through the forest. This chase might last hours, requiring the hunters to push through exhaustion, dehydration, and the burning pain in their muscles. There is no stopping for a water break or energy bar. Success or failure now depends entirely on their physical conditioning and mental determination. The gathering party, led by the oldest woman, Mara, has spread out through the forest understory. They move methodically, their eyes constantly scanning for useful plants. Today they find a patch of tubers similar to modern yams, which require digging to harvest. The women take turns using their digging sticks to pry the nutritious roots from the hard-packed soil. This is strenuous labor, causing blisters and straining back muscles. They also collect berries, nuts, edible leaves, and medicinal plants. Each plant must be evaluated for ripeness and safety. Is this mushroom the edible variety or its poisonous look-alike? Are these berries at peak ripeness, or will they cause stomach distress? This knowledge cannot be Googled or referenced in a field guide. It must be carried in memory and continually updated through observation. By mid-afternoon, their baskets are reasonably full, but the day's work is far from over. Many of the collected plants require extensive processing before they become edible. Some contain toxic compounds that must be leached out through soaking or cooking. Others need to be pounded with stones to break down tough fibers. This processing will continue well into the evening hours. On their return journey, the gathering party discovers a honeybee nest in a hollow tree. Honey represents an invaluable find, a rare source of concentrated calories and natural preservation properties. But harvesting it means braving numerous painful stings, as they lack protective gear. Mara makes the decision to attempt collection, using smoke from a smoldering branch to subdue the bees somewhat. Still, everyone in the party receives multiple stings during the process. For individuals with unknown bee allergies, this routine food gathering activity could prove fatal. As the sun begins its descent, both parties return to the camp. The hunters arrive first, successful but exhausted. They've managed to bring down the wounded deer after a chase lasting nearly 5 hours. The animal, a young female weighing approximately 70 pounds, represents an enormous caloric windfall for the band, perhaps 50,000 to 60,000 calories in total. But first, it must be processed. Using stone knives crafted through the painstaking process of knapping, striking one stone against another to create sharp edges, the men begin butchering the deer. This is not the sanitized meat preparation of a modern kitchen. Blood covers their hands and arms as they carefully separate hide from flesh, not wanting to waste any usable material. The hide will become clothing or shelter material. Tendons will be dried and used as binding material. Bones will become tools. Even the brain will be consumed or used in the hide tanning process. When the gathering party returns, they join in processing both the deer and their collected plant foods. Everyone in the band participates according to ability. Even young children are assigned tasks like collecting firewood or stripping edible seeds from plants. There is no concept of leisure time as we understand it today. Every waking hour is devoted to survival tasks or the preparation for tomorrow's survival needs. As darkness falls, the fire becomes the center of activity. Various foods are cooked using different techniques. Some plants roasted directly in the coals, others placed in tightly woven baskets with heated stones to create a primitive form of boiling. Meat is cooked minimally, primarily to kill parasites rather than for taste. The concept of doneness is irrelevant when caloric intake is the priority. The meal is the day's high point, the first substantial food most band members have eaten in nearly 24 hours. There are no plates, no utensils beyond perhaps a sharp stone flake for cutting. Foods are eaten with hands, often communally. There is no concern for portion control or dietary preferences. In a world of caloric scarcity, refusing available food is unthinkable. After eating, the band settles around the fire. This is the only time for social bonding, storytelling, and knowledge transmission. There are no books, no recordings, no written language. All information, from plant identification to hunting techniques to the band's history and mythology, must be verbally transmitted and memorized. Sleep comes early, as darkness makes most activities impossible or dangerous. The band arranges themselves around the fire, each individual wrapped in whatever hides or plant fiber blankets they possess. There are no mattresses, no pillows, no temperature control beyond the fire's fluctuating heat. Sleep is often interrupted to add fuel to the fire, to investigate sounds that might represent danger, to soothe crying children. Throughout the night, at least one person remains semi-awake, maintaining the fire and listening for predators. Large carnivores like wolves, lions, and bears posed a significant threat to Stone Age humans, particularly at night. Without substantial shelters, the fire and human vigilance were the primary defenses. For the modern human accustomed to uninterrupted sleep in climate-controlled environments, this pattern of broken sleep on hard ground in variable temperatures would quickly lead to sleep deprivation, further compromising judgment and physical performance. As the first light appears on the horizon, the cycle begins again. There is no weekend coming, no vacation, no retirement. Every day demands the same vigilance, the same physical exertion, the same focus on immediate survival needs. The deer will provide several days of food security, but preservation methods are limited. Much of the meat must be consumed relatively quickly before spoilage sets in. And already the band must be thinking about the next hunt, the next gathering expedition. This relentless cycle, find food, process food, eat, sleep, repeat, defined human existence for millions of years. The physical and mental adaptations required to thrive in this environment were encoded in our biology through countless generations of natural selection. Those who couldn't keep up, who couldn't master the necessary skills, who couldn't endure the physical demands, simply didn't survive to reproduce. The modern human, despite possessing vastly more abstract knowledge than our Stone Age ancestors, lacks the specific practical skills and physical conditioning that made survival possible. Without calloused feet, hands toughened by constant use, muscles adapted to specific movement patterns, and the encyclopedic natural knowledge carried in memory, a contemporary person would find every aspect of this daily routine not merely challenging, but potentially fatal. Weather in the Stone Age wasn't merely an inconvenience or a topic of small talk. It was a dominant force that shaped every aspect of daily existence. Without modern infrastructure, technology, or warning systems, our ancestors lived in direct relationship with atmospheric conditions, developing intricate knowledge systems and adaptive behaviors to survive. For most of human evolution, adequate shelter was a constant challenge. Early Paleolithic peoples utilized whatever natural features provided protection: caves, rock overhangs, and dense vegetation. Later, as technologies developed, constructed shelters became more sophisticated, but remained fundamentally vulnerable to extreme weather events. Consider a typical rainfall. To the modern human, rain means perhaps getting wet between car and building, or postponing outdoor activities. To Stone Age humans, persistent rain could mean hypothermia risk. When wet and temperatures below 70 degrees Fahrenheit, 21 degrees Celsius, the human body loses heat 25 times faster than when dry. Without waterproof clothing or reliable heating, even moderate rainfall could become life-threatening, particularly for the very young, elderly, or injured. Fire maintenance challenges. Keeping fire alive during rainfall required elaborate precautions and techniques, including constructing protective structures and maintaining dry tinder supplies. Without fire, cooking, warmth, protection from predators, and tool-making became impossible. Mobility restrictions. Rainfall transformed dirt paths into mud, made river crossings dangerous, and obscured tracking signs, potentially cutting off access to resources or forcing dangerous travel conditions. Food spoilage. Without proper storage, many gathered foods would quickly rot in damp conditions, potentially causing food shortages even after successful gathering expeditions. Merak, a middle-aged hunter, recalls the unexpected storm that struck his band 3 seasons earlier. They had been following a herd of bison across the open plains when dark clouds gathered with unusual speed. With no natural shelter available, the band hurriedly constructed makeshift windbreaks using their hunting tools and animal hides. As hail began falling, stones of ice large enough to bruise exposed skin, they huddled together, using their collective body heat to prevent hypothermia. 2 elders and an infant didn't survive that night. The combination of exposure, pre-existing vulnerabilities, and the inability to maintain adequate body temperature proved fatal. Such weather-related deaths were commonplace throughout the Stone Age, claiming countless lives through direct exposure or the secondary effects of resource disruption. Stone Age humans developed intricate knowledge of seasonal patterns, knowledge that was essential for survival. Unlike the modern calendar with its arbitrary divisions, prehistoric timekeeping was tied directly to natural phenomena. Migration patterns. Tracking the movement of prey animals required understanding how weather influenced their behavior. The first frost might signal the beginning of certain animal migrations, creating narrow windows of hunting opportunity. Plant availability. Each edible plant had its own schedule of availability, often with brief periods of optimal harvest. Missing these windows could mean the difference between abundance and scarcity. Water availability. Seasonal rainfall patterns determined where settlements could be established and how long they could be maintained. In arid regions, miscalculating the onset of dry seasons could be fatal. Activity planning. Energy-intensive activities like shelter construction or tool manufacturing needed to be completed during favorable weather periods, requiring complex forward planning without written records. Anthropological studies of modern hunter-gatherer societies reveal systems of environmental knowledge that would humble many contemporary meteorologists. The Inuit, for instance, traditionally identified dozens of distinct snow and ice types, each with specific implications for travel, hunting, and shelter construction. Similar knowledge systems existed across all Stone Age societies, representing cognitive adaptations to environmental challenges. Archaeological evidence from late Paleolithic sites suggests increasing sophistication in seasonal adaptation strategies. Storage pits, seasonal butchering sites, and specialized processing areas indicate communities developing complex responses to weather patterns and seasonal variation. Throughout the Stone Age, human populations faced numerous climate shifts, from ice ages to warming periods. These changes occurred gradually by modern standards, but still required significant adaptations within human lifespans. The transition from the last ice age to the Holocene period, beginning approximately 11,700 years ago, saw average global temperatures rise by 5 to 7 degrees Celsius, 9 to 13 degrees Fahrenheit, over several thousand years. This warming transformed ecosystems worldwide, altering resource availability and forcing human adaptation. Changing prey profiles. As mammoth and other megafauna populations declined, hunting strategies had to evolve to target smaller, more dispersed game. Vegetation changes. Warming temperatures altered plant communities, requiring foragers to learn new food sources and abandon traditional gathering areas. Rising sea levels. Coastal populations had to relocate as melting ice caps raised ocean levels, inundating previously habitable areas. New competition. Climate-driven migration brought previously separated human groups into contact, sometimes resulting in conflict over resources. Archaeological evidence from this transition period shows remarkable human ingenuity in the face of environmental change. Tool technologies diversified rapidly, settlement patterns shifted, and new subsistence strategies emerged. However, these adaptations came at tremendous cost. Population bottlenecks, nutritional stress, and likely significant mortality during adjustment periods. For modern humans accustomed to climate-controlled environments, the skill of reading weather signs has largely atrophied. Few contemporary individuals can predict rainfall timing based on cloud formations, identify safe shelter locations in various terrain types, maintain body temperature in extreme conditions without specialized gear. recognize how weather patterns affect resource availability. This knowledge gap represents one of the most immediate threats to a modern person transported to the Stone Age. Without the ability to anticipate and respond appropriately to weather conditions, even mild climatic events could prove fatal within hours. Stone Age humans possessed the same basic physiological mechanisms as modern people, but their bodies were conditioned through constant exposure to respond more effectively to environmental challenges. Consider cold adaptation. Archaeological and anthropological evidence suggests that Paleolithic peoples in northern latitudes developed significant cold tolerance through both genetic adaptation and lifelong exposure. Studies of modern hunter-gatherer groups in cold environments show elevated basal metabolic rates. Some indigenous Arctic populations demonstrate metabolic rates 30 to 40% higher than temperate climate populations when exposed to cold. More efficient peripheral vasoconstriction, the ability to reduce blood flow to extremities, conserving core temperature. Behavioral adaptations, specific postures, movement patterns, and activity timing to minimize heat loss. These adaptations weren't merely cultural, they represented the body's physiological response to consistent environmental pressure. Modern humans, having lived for generations in thermally controlled environments, have largely lost these adaptive capabilities. When suddenly exposed to temperature extremes, our bodies struggle to implement effective responses, dramatically increasing vulnerability. The same principles apply to heat adaptation. Stone Age humans in tropical environments developed specific physiological and behavioral adaptations to function in high-temperature conditions. These included efficient sweating responses, earlier activation of sweating mechanisms, and more effective electrolyte conservation. Activity timing, restricting high-energy activities to cooler parts of the day. Rest postures, specific positions that maximize cooling through increased surface area exposure. Without these conditioned responses, modern humans experience heat exhaustion and heat stroke much more rapidly than our ancestors, despite being genetically identical. Perhaps the most significant weather-related adaptation in Stone Age humans was cognitive, the development of predictive mental models based on environmental observation. These models allowed for anticipatory planning rather than merely reactive response. Luli, an elder woman of her band, has spent decades observing the relationship between wind patterns, cloud formations, and subsequent weather. When she notices a particular combination of conditions, a shift in wind direction, a specific cloud type on the horizon, unusual animal behavior, she recognizes the signs of an approaching storm system days before its arrival. This recognition triggers a cascade of preparatory activities, reinforcing shelter structures, gathering additional firewood, harvesting foods that might be damaged by heavy rain, and positioning the band away from flood-prone areas. These actions, taken well before visible evidence of the storm appears, significantly increase survival chances. Modern humans, despite access to sophisticated meteorological technology, have largely outsourced this observational knowledge. The average contemporary person cannot identify more than a few basic cloud types, correlate animal behavior with impending weather changes, read landscape features for weather prediction, recognize subtle environmental signals of atmospheric shifts. This knowledge deficit represents a critical vulnerability for modern humans in a Stone Age context. Without the ability to anticipate weather changes through direct observation, we would consistently find ourselves unprepared for conditions our ancestors saw coming days in advance. Stone Age peoples didn't merely survive weather, they incorporated it into their subsistence strategies, using atmospheric conditions as tools for resource acquisition. wind patterns for hunting, positioning relative to prey based on wind direction to prevent detection via scent. Rain events for tracking. Fresh rainfall made animal tracks more visible and easier to follow. Seasonal floods for fishing. Many groups develop specialized techniques to harvest fish during predictable flood cycles. Snow conditions for preservation. Cold weather allowed meat storage through freezing in northern climates. Lightning caused fires. Natural fires were sometimes strategically managed for habitat modification and hunting advantage. These strategies required intimate knowledge of how weather affected landscapes and animal behavior. Knowledge accumulated through generations of observation and encoded in cultural practices and oral traditions. The modern human, even one with substantial outdoor experience, typically lacks this depth of environmental relationship. We have been trained to see weather primarily as a factor to be mitigated or avoided, rather than integrated into resource acquisition strategies. The relationship between Stone Age humans and weather represents one of the most profound disconnects between prehistoric and modern experience. Our ancestors lived in constant negotiation with atmospheric conditions, developing physical adaptations, knowledge systems, and behavioral responses that allowed survival in environments we would find immediately threatening. For the modern human suddenly transported to the Stone Age, weather would present immediate and potentially fatal challenges. Exposure risk. Without conditioned physiological responses and appropriate behavioral adaptations, temperature extremes would quickly lead to hypothermia or heat illness. Preparation deficit. The inability to read environmental signals would prevent adequate preparation for weather events. Resource disconnection. The lack of understanding of how weather affects resource availability would lead to missed opportunities and inefficient subsistence efforts. Shelter inadequacy. Without knowledge of appropriate shelter construction techniques for specific weather conditions, protection would be insufficient. These vulnerabilities would manifest within hours of arrival in a Stone Age context, making weather one of the most immediate threats to survival for a time-displaced modern human. While our ancestors saw the sky as a complex text to be read for survival information, we have largely forgotten this fundamental language of human existence. In the modern world, most humans rarely encounter wild predators. Our biggest threats come from microscopic pathogens, other humans, or our own lifestyle choices. But for Stone Age people, large carnivores represented an ever-present danger that shaped behavior, settlement patterns, and evolutionary adaptations. Simultaneously, humans themselves were predators, developing increasingly sophisticated hunting strategies to secure vital calories from animal sources. This dual identity, as both predator and potential prey, created a psychological vigilance state virtually unknown to modern humans outside specific wilderness professions. Understanding this constant awareness helps explain why contemporary people would struggle to survive in a world where attention lapses could mean becoming another creature's meal. Archaeological evidence clearly demonstrates that early humans were not only aware of these predators, but were sometimes their victims. At Dmanisi, Georgia, 1.8 million-year-old hominin remains show carnivore tooth marks, indicating scavenging, if not direct predation. The famous Tong child, a juvenile Australopithecus africanus discovered in South Africa, bears marks consistent with eagle predation. Throughout the fossil record, evidence of carnivore damage to human remains appears regularly. For Stone Age humans, this predator pressure created a survival environment fundamentally different from modern experience. Consider these realities. Night vulnerability. Without substantial shelter or artificial lighting, darkness represented extreme danger. Many large carnivores are nocturnal hunters, with sensory adaptations giving them significant advantages in low-light conditions. Water access risk. Predictable human movement to water sources created ambush opportunities for predators. Many carnivores specifically target prey at water sources, where drinking animals are distracted and vulnerable. Children as targets. Smaller body size made children preferred targets for medium-sized predators. In many recorded instances of leopard predation on modern humans, children are disproportionately targeted. Limited defense options. Before projectile weapons became sophisticated, humans had few effective defenses against determined predator attacks, particularly from ambush hunters like big cats. Mara crouches by the stream, filling a watertight basket woven from plant fibers. Her eyes never stop moving, scanning the surrounding vegetation for movement or shapes that don't belong. One hand remains close to the stone knife at her waist. Though focused on her task, her ears register every sound. The wind through leaves, birds calling in the canopy, the water's gentle flow. When a twig snaps somewhere behind her, she freezes instantly, assessing direction and distance before slowly turning to look. This behavior isn't conscious. It's ingrained through lifelong conditioning in an environment where predators are a constant possibility. Mara has witnessed 2 members of her band killed by leopards during her lifetime. She knows that death can come suddenly from the shadows, often with little warning. The modern human, lacking this conditioned vigilance, would present an easy target in a predator-rich environment. Our attention patterns have been shaped by environments where unexpected lethal threats are exceptionally rare. We focus intently on tasks, frequently tuning out background stimuli that would have alerted our ancestors to potential danger. This attention deficit represents a critical survival vulnerability in Stone Age contexts. While living with the risk of becoming prey, Stone Age humans were simultaneously evolving into remarkably effective predators themselves. This transformation from vulnerable prey species to apex predator represents one of the most significant adaptations in human evolution. Early hunting methods were opportunistic and high risk. Without sophisticated weapons, early hominins likely used the following approaches. Scavenging. Claiming kills from other predators, often by driving them away through group intimidation. Opportunity hunting, targeting very young, old, or injured animals that could be dispatched with minimal technology. Endurance hunting, pursuing prey to exhaustion in hot conditions, exploiting humans' superior thermoregulation and stamina. Communal driving, coordinating to drive animals into natural traps like ravines or mud pits. Each of these methods required specific skills, knowledge, and physical capabilities that modern humans typically lack. Tracking ability. Stone Age hunters could read subtle signs on the landscape, disturbed vegetation, soil disturbance, droppings, feeding evidence, to locate and follow prey. This tracking knowledge represented a sophisticated cognitive system developed through lifelong learning. Environmental awareness. Successful hunting required intimate understanding of how landscape features, weather conditions, and time of day influenced animal behavior. Hunters knew exactly where particular species would likely be found under specific conditions. Physical adaptation. Persistent hunting demanded cardiovascular efficiency, heat tolerance, and specific muscle development patterns that developed through lifelong activity. Animal behavior knowledge. Hunters maintained detailed mental models of prey species behavior, including feeding patterns, social structures, defensive tactics, and movement tendencies. As technological innovation progressed through the Stone Age, hunting methods became more sophisticated and effective, though no less demanding of specific knowledge. Middle Paleolithic, 300,000 to 50,000 years ago. Specialized hunting tools, including hafted spears, ambush hunting using landscape features, evidence of coordinated group hunting strategies, selective targeting of specific prey species and age groups. Upper Paleolithic 50,000 to 10,000 years ago, bow and arrow technology, specialized projectile points for different game, sophisticated trapping techniques, long-distance projectile hunting, more complex game processing techniques. Archaeological evidence reveals the increasing sophistication of hunting technologies through time. The 400,000-year-old wooden spears discovered at Schöningen, Germany, demonstrate that even Neanderthals were creating specialized hunting implements. By the Upper Paleolithic, humans were manufacturing complex composite tools specifically designed for hunting, including atlatls, spear throwers, that effectively extended the human arm for greater throwing power. The cognitive demands of hunting behavior shaped human evolution. Some paleoanthropologists argue that the planning, coordination, and communication required for successful hunting drove the development of language and advanced cognition. Hunting also necessitated the formation of complex social relationships. Coordinated group hunting is more successful than individual efforts for many prey species. For a modern human transported to the Stone Age, effective hunting would present nearly insurmountable challenges. Knowledge deficit. Without the ability to identify animal signs, predict movement patterns, or understand behavior, locating prey would be largely random. Tool inadequacy. Manufacturing effective hunting weapons from natural materials requires specific knowledge and practiced skill. Modern humans would likely produce ineffective tools. Physical limitations. Without the conditioning required for persistence hunting or the stealth developed through lifelong practice, modern humans would struggle with basic hunting approaches. Risk assessment. Proper evaluation of when to pursue prey versus when the risk outweighs potential gain requires experience-based judgment. These limitations would make securing animal protein, a critical component of Stone Age diets, extremely difficult for contemporary people suddenly placed in prehistoric contexts. Perhaps the most psychologically alien aspect of Stone Age existence for modern humans was the dual awareness required to function as both predator and potential prey. This cognitive state demanded simultaneous attention to being hunted, maintaining vigilance for signs of predators in the environment. Hunting, actively seeking and processing signs of potential prey. Environmental hazards, monitoring for non-predator threats like poisonous plants, unstable terrain, or dangerous weather. Social dynamics, tracking the location and activities of other band members for coordination. This divided attention represents a cognitive adaptation largely lost in modern humans. Contemporary attention patterns tend toward either focused concentration on single tasks or diffuse attention across non-survival stimuli. The specific attentional style required for Stone Age survival, simultaneously broad and targeted, is rarely developed in modern contexts. Nara, a young hunter in her band, demonstrates this dual awareness as she tracks a small herd of antelope across the savanna. Even as she carefully studies the ground for tracks and disturbed vegetation, her peripheral vision constantly scans the horizon and surrounding landscape. She regularly pauses to listen and smell the air, momentarily shifting her focus from hunting to potential threats before returning to the track. When she spots distant movement in her peripheral vision, she instantly assesses predator or prey before continuing her pursuit. This divided attention isn't just a behavioral choice. It's a neurological adaptation developed through constant exposure to environments where threats and opportunities exist simultaneously. Modern humans, raised in environments largely devoid of immediate lethal threats, typically develop attention patterns focused on specific tasks with minimal peripheral awareness. When a contemporary person engages in a task, even outdoors, they frequently enter a state of focused attention that effectively blinds them to surrounding stimuli. This attention tunneling would prove deadly in environments where predators actively target distracted prey. For Stone Age humans, the search for sustenance was a never-ending challenge that consumed most waking hours. Unlike modern humans who might spend 15 minutes shopping for a week's worth of food, our ancestors devoted 60 to 80% of their daily energy to food acquisition. Understanding the complexities of prehistoric food procurement helps illustrate why the average modern human would quickly starve if transported back in time. Stone Age humans were opportunistic omnivores, consuming virtually anything edible in their environment. This dietary flexibility was a crucial adaptation, allowing human populations to inhabit diverse ecosystems from Arctic tundra to tropical rainforests. However, this omnivorous strategy created what anthropologists call the omnivore's dilemma: the challenge of distinguishing between nutritious and toxic items in a diverse environment. For Stone Age humans, solving this dilemma required extensive knowledge accumulated through generations. Plant identification. The average hunter-gatherer could identify hundreds of plant species, knowing which parts were edible, when they were safe to harvest, and how they needed to be processed. Animal behavior patterns. Successful hunters maintained detailed mental models of prey movements, feeding habits, and seasonal patterns. Seasonal availability. Food procurement strategies shifted constantly with seasonal changes in resource availability. Processing requirements. Many foods required specific preparation techniques to render them safe and digestible. Tika, a middle-aged woman of her band, demonstrates this knowledge as she leads a gathering expedition through the forest. She passes dozens of plant species that modern humans might consider potential food sources, but she ignores most. Some are in the wrong growth stage. Others require more processing effort than their caloric return justifies, and some contain subtle toxins recognizable only to the experienced eye. When she spots a particular tuber, she quickly digs several pounds from the soil, knowing that this specific plant contains high starch content with minimal processing requirements. She passes a mushroom patch that appears identical to edible varieties, but contains a subtle cap coloration difference that indicates toxicity. These fine distinctions, impossible to learn from books or brief instruction, represent knowledge accumulated through lifelong observation and cultural transmission. For modern humans suddenly placed in a Stone Age context, this knowledge gap would prove immediately fatal. Studies of wilderness survival situations show that inexperienced individuals frequently poison themselves within the first 72 hours by consuming toxic plants misidentified as edible. Without the extensive mental catalog of safe foods carried by our ancestors, modern humans would face a terrible choice: risk poisoning by eating unknown plants, or starve while searching for recognizable foods that might not exist in their environment. Contrary to popular depictions of Stone Age diets as predominantly meat-based, archaeological and anthropological evidence indicates that plant foods typically provided 60 to 80% of calories for most hunter-gatherer groups. This plant-focused diet reflected practical realities. Plant foods were generally more predictably available than game animals, less dangerous to procure, provided essential micronutrients, required less energy expenditure per calorie returned. The plant portion of Stone Age diets varied dramatically by region and season, but typically included underground storage organs. Tubers, roots, rhizomes, and bulbs provided dense carbohydrate sources critical for maintaining energy levels. Nuts and seeds, high in fat and protein, These calorie-dense foods were prized but seasonally limited. Fruits and berries provided essential vitamins but were highly seasonal and perishable. Leaves and stems offered crucial micronutrients but required substantial gathering effort for modest caloric returns. Fungi, opportunistically gathered when available, but requiring expert knowledge to avoid toxic species. Gathering these plant foods was far from the casual berry picking depicted in popular media. It represented systematic, knowledge-intensive labor requiring tool use, specialized implements like digging sticks, carrying containers, and processing stones. Landscape knowledge, mental mapping of resource locations across large territories. Processing expertise. Many plant foods contain toxic compounds requiring specific detoxification techniques, leaching with water, fermentation, cooking at specific temperatures, grinding and pounding to break down indigestible fibers. Archaeological evidence from sites like Ohalot in Israel, 23,000 years old, reveals sophisticated plant processing technologies, including grinding stones with preserved seed residues. These technologies weren't merely convenient, they were essential for accessing the caloric content of many plant foods. For modern humans lacking this processing knowledge, many potentially edible plants would remain effectively inedible. Without knowing proper preparation techniques, foods like acorns, which require leaching to remove bitter tannins, or certain tubers, which contain toxic compounds when raw, would cause illness rather than provide nutrition. While plant foods provided the caloric foundation for most Stone Age diets, animal protein represented a crucial nutritional component that shaped human evolutionary history. Hunting offered access to dense protein sources, essential for muscle maintenance and growth. Critical fats, necessary for brain development and function. Vitamin B12, not available from plant sources. Iron in highly bioavailable form, more efficiently absorbed than plant-based iron. The importance of these nutrients drove Stone Age humans to develop increasingly sophisticated hunting strategies despite the considerable risks involved. Unlike modern sport hunting, prehistoric hunting was a life-or-death proposition, with failure potentially meaning starvation for the entire band. Hunting methods varied by environment, prey species, and available technologies, but typically included persistence hunting. Early humans exploited their superior endurance and thermoregulation to literally run prey to exhaustion. This technique, still practiced by some modern hunter-gatherer groups like the San of the Kalahari, requires exceptional cardiovascular fitness, heat tolerance, tracking expertise to follow prey that has left visual range, knowledge of animal behavior to predict movement patterns. Ambush hunting, positioning hunters at locations where prey animals were likely to pass based on detailed knowledge of movement patterns. Water sources, game trails, seasonal migration routes, feeding areas. Communal game drives, coordinating large groups to channel animals toward wading hunters or natural features like cliffs or bogs, required sophisticated planning and communication, involved clear role assignments for different group members, necessitated precise timing and coordination. As technological innovation progressed through the Stone Age, hunting methods incorporated increasingly sophisticated weapons. Early Paleolithic, 2.5 million to 200,000 years ago. Simple wooden spears, throwing stones, wooden clubs. Middle Paleolithic, 300,000 to 50,000 years ago. Hafted spears with stone points, thrusting spears for close-quarter hunting. Evidence of simple traps and snares. Upper Paleolithic, 50,000 to 10,000 years ago. Spear throwers, atlatls, extending throwing range and power. Bow and arrow technology. Complex trapping systems. specialized hunting tools for different prey. The cognitive demands of hunting helped drive human brain evolution. The planning, coordination, and predictive thinking required for successful hunting expeditions exercised precisely the cognitive capacities that distinguish humans from other primates. Some anthropologists argue that hunting's mental challenges were a key selective pressure favoring increased brain size and complexity throughout human evolution. For modern humans suddenly placed in a Stone Age context, effective hunting would prove nearly impossible. Without the physical conditioning, learned skills, and environmental knowledge developed through lifelong practice, contemporary people would lack. Physical endurance for persistence hunting, stealth movement techniques for approaching prey without detection, weapons manufacturing skills for creating effective hunting tools, tracking abilities for following animal sign, knowledge of animal behavior for predicting movements. These deficiencies would make securing animal protein extremely difficult, potentially leading to serious nutritional deficiencies, even if plant foods could be successfully gathered. Archaeological evidence increasingly suggests that aquatic resources played a crucial role in human evolution and Stone Age diets. Coastal, riverine, and lacustrine environments offered rich food sources that required specific knowledge and technologies to exploit effectively. Shellfish collection. Tidal zones provided predictable, stationary protein sources, but required knowledge of safe harvesting times, avoiding toxic algal blooms, extraction techniques for different species, tidal pattern understanding for access timing. Fishing. Stone Age fishing technologies included hand fishing techniques requiring intimate knowledge of fish behavior, spearing methods based on understanding how water refraction affects aim, weir and trap construction, exploiting fish movement patterns, net making using plant fibers or sinew, hook manufacturing from bone, shell, or wood. Aquatic plant harvesting. Many water plants provided reliable food sources. Cattail rhizomes and pollen, water lily tubers, various seaweeds in coastal areas. Isotope analysis of human remains from sites worldwide indicates that aquatic resources frequently provided significant portions of prehistoric diets. The omega-3 fatty acids available from these sources may have been particularly important for human brain development. For modern humans without specific knowledge of aquatic resource procurement, these potential food sources would remain largely inaccessible. Without understanding fish behavior, tidal patterns, or proper processing techniques, contemporary people would struggle to exploit these resources effectively. Stone Age humans lived with constant food insecurity, facing regular periods of scarcity. To survive these lean times, they developed sophisticated preservation and storage techniques. Drying, removing moisture to prevent bacterial growth. Meat cut into thin strips and sun-dried or smoke-dried. Fruits dehydrated on hot rocks or in the sun. Fish preserved through wind-drying or smoking. Smoking, preserving foods while adding antimicrobial compounds. Required careful fire management to produce the right kind of smoke. Necessitated specialized smoking structures in some environments. Fermentation, using controlled microbial action to preserve foods. Plant foods packed in containers to encourage beneficial bacterial growth. Fish and meat, sometimes preserved through controlled decomposition, provided additional nutritional benefits through probiotic activity. Freezing. In Arctic environments, meat could be cached in ice or permafrost. Required detailed knowledge of where frozen storage would remain viable. Necessitated protection from scavengers. Caching. Physical storage in protected locations. Underground pits lined with leaves or bark. Elevated platforms out of reach of ground predators. Cave storage areas with specific temperature and humidity profiles. Archaeological evidence from Upper Paleolithic sites reveals increasingly sophisticated storage technologies, including lined storage pits, specialized preservation areas, and evidence of smoking platforms. These technologies weren't luxury conveniences. They represented essential survival adaptations for environments with seasonal resource fluctuations. Modern humans suddenly transported to the Stone Age would lack these critical preservation skills. Without understanding proper drying techniques, smoking methods, or appropriate storage locations, any temporary food surplus would quickly spoil, leaving the time traveler vulnerable to starvation during inevitable lean periods. In Stone Age societies, food procurement wasn't solely an adult responsibility. Children participated from the earliest ages capable of useful contribution. Plant gathering. Children as young as 3 or 4 joined gathering expeditions, learning plant identification through direct observation, developing search image patterns for recognizing edible species, building physical stamina through daily activity. Small game hunting. Older children often hunted small animals independently, setting simple traps for rodents and birds, using child-sized weapons for hunting practice, developing stalking and ambush skills through play that doubled as training. Fishing. Children frequently participated in fish harvesting, hand fishing in shallow waters, collecting stranded fish from tidal pools, helping adults with net operations. This early participation served dual purposes, providing additional food for the group while simultaneously training the next generation in essential survival skills. By the time children reached adolescence, they had already accumulated a decade of practical experience in food procurement techniques. The modern child, by contrast, typically has minimal or no practical food gathering experience. Contemporary education focuses on abstract knowledge rather than direct subsistence skills. Without the decade-plus of hands-on learning experienced by Stone Age children, modern humans lack the foundation for effective food procurement in natural environments. Perhaps the most significant difference between the Stone Age and modern food systems was the pattern of consumption. Modern humans typically maintain relatively stable caloric intake with regular meals. Stone Age humans experienced dramatic fluctuations in food availability, creating a pattern often described as feast and famine. Feast periods, following successful hunts or during seasonal abundance. Gorging behavior to maximize caloric intake while food was available. Consumption of highest fat portions first to capitalize on caloric density. Social food sharing to distribute resources through the group. Famine periods, during resource scarcity. Activity reduction to conserve energy. Reliance on famine foods, normally avoided due to low palatability or difficult processing. Possible band fission to reduce pressure on limited resources. The human metabolism evolved in this context of irregular food availability. Some researchers argue that our bodies function optimally with occasional periods of caloric restriction rather than constant food availability. The metabolic adaptations that allowed our ancestors to survive food scarcity, efficient fat storage, ketosis capabilities during carbohydrate restriction, protein-sparing mechanisms, remain with us today. Modern humans, suddenly faced with Stone Age food realities, would struggle with both the physical and psychological adjustments required. Unaccustomed to hunger as anything other than a brief, easily remedied condition, contemporary people typically experience significant distress, cognitive impairment, and mood disruption when facing even moderate caloric restriction. The psychological resilience required to function effectively during food scarcity represents another adaptation our ancestors possessed that most modern humans lack. The gulf between Stone Age and modern food procurement knowledge represents perhaps the most immediate survival challenge for a time-displaced contemporary human. Without extensive botanical knowledge, animal behavior understanding, processing expertise, and physical conditioning, the modern person would face near-certain starvation within days or weeks. This knowledge gap illustrates a profound truth about human survival. Our species' success has always depended more on cultural knowledge than biological adaptation. Unlike most animals, who are born with instinctual knowledge of appropriate foods, humans must learn what to eat through cultural transmission and direct experience. The loss of this traditional ecological knowledge in modern societies represents one of the most profound disconnections between contemporary humans and our evolutionary past. When modern humans think of technology, we typically envision electronic devices, complex machinery, or sophisticated software. But technology, the application of knowledge to create tools that extend human capabilities, has been central to human survival since our earliest origins. Stone Age technologies represented not primitive attempts at modern tools, but sophisticated adaptations perfectly suited to specific environmental challenges. Understanding the complexity, skill requirements, and time investment involved in prehistoric tool-making helps explain why modern humans, despite our advanced theoretical knowledge, would struggle to create even the most basic Stone Age technologies if suddenly transported back in time. The Stone Age derives its name from humanity's primary tool-making material during this vast time period. But stone tools encompassed an extraordinary range of specialized implements, each requiring specific knowledge and skills to produce effectively. Early Paleolithic, 2.5 million to 200,000 years ago. Oldowan tools, simple core and flake implements, required understanding of stone fracture mechanics. Necessitated selection of appropriate stone types with suitable fracture patterns. Created sharp cutting edges for processing animal carcasses and plant materials. Acheulean hand axes, bifacially worked multi-purpose tools, demanded advanced planning and visualization skills, required sophisticated flaking techniques with controlled force application, represented standardized designs maintained across vast geographic areas and time periods. Middle Paleolithic, 300,000 to 50,000 years ago. Levallois technique, prepared core method, producing standardized flakes, involved complex conceptualization of the final product within the raw material. Required multiple sequential steps executed in precise order. Demonstrated advanced understanding of stone fracture patterns, specialized tool forms, task-specific implements for different activities, scrapers for hide processing, points for hunting weapons, barons for working bone and antler, denticulates for woodworking. Upper Paleolithic, 50,000 to 10,000 years ago. Blade technologies, systematic production of long parallel-sided flakes, required preparation of specialized cores. Demonstrated advanced conceptualization and planning, allowed efficient use of raw materials. Microlithic technologies, small, standardized stone components, designed for hafting into composite tools, required precise manufacturing techniques, demonstrated sophisticated understanding of mechanical principles. Archaeological experiments have demonstrated the exceptional skill required for effective stone tool production. Modern attempts to replicate prehistoric technologies reveal that even accomplished flint knappers require years of practice to achieve the quality and efficiency demonstrated in archaeological specimens. For a novice, creating even simple cutting tools represents a significant challenge, with high rates of failure and injury. Tarok, a skilled toolmaker of his band, demonstrates this expertise as he shapes a new spear point from flint. His movements are precise and economical, each strike building on the previous modification. He regularly pauses to assess the emerging form, rotating the piece to evaluate it from multiple angles. His fingers, calloused from years of flint napping, instinctively find the optimal striking platforms for removing specific flakes. Within an hour, he has transformed a seemingly unpromising nodule into a symmetrical, razor-sharp projectile point, a feat that would take a modern novice days or weeks of practice to achieve, if they could manage it at all. For modern humans, suddenly transported to the Stone Age, effective tool production would present immediate challenges. Material identification, recognizing suitable stone types with appropriate fracture properties. Technique deficiency, lacking the motor skills developed through years of practice. Conceptual gaps, missing the mental templates for effective tool design. Physical vulnerability, high risk of injury during initial attempts at tool production. These limitations would severely restrict a modern person's ability to create the tools necessary for basic survival activities like hunting, gathering, and shelter construction. While stone tools dominate archaeological collections due to their preservation properties, they represented only a fraction of prehistoric technologies. Organic materials, wood, bone, antler, plant fibers, and animal products were transformed into a vast array of essential tools that rarely survive in the archaeological record. Wooden implements, digging sticks, essential for harvesting underground plant foods, required selection of appropriate hardwoods, necessitated fire-hardening techniques to increase durability, demanded regular maintenance to maintain effectiveness. Spears and projectiles, primary hunting technologies, involve careful selection of straight-grained woods with appropriate flexibility. Required precise shaping for aerodynamic performance. Necessitated balance considerations for throwing accuracy. Containers, essential for food transport and storage, included bowls carved from wood burls. Bark containers with folded and sewn seams. Wooden troughs for food processing. Bone and antler tools, needles, critical for clothing manufacture, required careful splitting and grinding techniques, necessitated precise eye formation for thread passage, demanded exceptional fine motor control. Harpoons and fishing implements, specialized hunting tools, involved complex notching and barb creation, required knowledge of mechanical properties of different skeletal elements, demanded understanding of aquatic prey behavior. Awls and punches, essential for leather working, necessitated specific shaping techniques, required regular maintenance and resharpening. Fiber technologies, cordage, fundamental technology enabling countless other tools, required knowledge of appropriate plant species, involved complex processing to extract usable fibers, demanded sophisticated twisting and plying techniques. Baskets and containers, essential for gathering and storage, involved selection of specific plant materials with suitable properties. Required complex weaving techniques. Necessitated knowledge of waterproofing methods for some applications. Nets and traps, efficient hunting and fishing technologies. Required significant time investment in cordage production. Involved complex knotting techniques. Demanded understanding of prey movement patterns. Experimental archaeology has demonstrated the sophistication of these organic technologies. Modern attempts to reproduce simple fiber items like cordage reveal that considerable expertise is required for creating even basic products. Without specific knowledge of material properties and processing techniques, contemporary humans typically produce substandard implements that fail under use conditions. For modern humans in a Stone Age context, the organic technology knowledge gap would prove as limiting as the stone tool deficit. Without understanding which plants provide suitable fibers, how to process those fibers effectively, or how to transform them into usable cordage, many essential technologies would remain inaccessible. Similarly, without knowledge of appropriate wood selection and processing, critical implements like digging sticks, spear shafts, and containers would be difficult or impossible to create effectively. As the Stone Age progressed, humans increasingly developed composite technologies, tools combining multiple materials to create implements more effective than any single material tool could be. These composite technologies represented significant cognitive advances, requiring mental templates of the complete tool before beginning construction, forward planning to ensure all necessary components were available, understanding of material interfaces and appropriate binding techniques, knowledge of mechanical properties of different materials under stress. Examples of these sophisticated composite technologies included hafted tools, stone-tipped spears, combining wooden shafts with stone points, required precise shaping of both components for secure fitting, necessitated sophisticated binding techniques using sinew, plant fibers, or rawhide, demanded understanding of adhesive properties of natural materials like pine resin. Axes and adzes, essential for woodworking, involved careful selection of appropriate handle woods with shock-absorbing properties, required complex notching or socket creation for secure attachment, necessitated understanding of leverage principles, specialized hunting technologies, atlatls, spear throwers, effectively extending the human arm, required precise balance calculations, necessitated ergonomic design for effective power transfer, demonstrated advanced understanding of projectile physics. Bows and arrows, perhaps the most complex hunting technology, required selection of woods with appropriate tension and compression properties, involved sophisticated string technologies using precisely processed sinew or plant fibers, necessitated deep understanding of energy storage and release mechanics, demanded precise manufacturing to ensure consistent performance. Archaeological evidence reveals that these composite technologies represented the culmination of thousands of years of technological evolution. Each component and connection point was optimized through generations of experimentation and knowledge transmission. For modern humans without specific manufacturing knowledge, creating effective composite tools would be exceptionally challenging. The precise material selection, processing requirements, and assembly techniques would not be intuitively obvious, even to individuals with theoretical understanding of the tool's functions. Without direct instruction or extensive trial and error, contemporary people would likely produce ineffective implements that would fail during critical use moments. Perhaps the most significant aspect of Stone Age technology that modern humans would struggle with is the time investment required. In a world of manufactured goods, contemporary people rarely consider the hours of labor embedded in the objects they use. For Stone Age humans, however, technology creation represented a substantial portion of daily life. Gathering raw materials often required dedicated expeditions. Specific stone types might only be available from distant sources. Certain plant fibers might only be harvestable during particular seasons. Animal products required successful hunting before tool production could begin. Initial processing, transforming raw materials into usable components. Stone had to be carefully reduced through controlled fracture. Plants required soaking, pounding, or other processing to extract usable elements. Animal materials needed cleaning, drying, and preparation. Tool creation, the actual manufacturing process. Complex tools might require days or weeks of dedicated work. Composite technologies involved multiple sequential steps. Many processes required specific environmental conditions, proper lighting, dry weather, etc. Maintenance and repair, ongoing investment to maintain technological systems. Cutting edges required regular resharpening. Bindings needed inspection and replacement. Wooden components demanded protection from moisture and insects. This time investment represented a form of life insurance. Technology was worth the hours invested because it dramatically increased survival chances. Stone Age humans accepted this time cost because they understood through direct experience the value of properly made tools. Modern humans, accustomed to immediate gratification and manufactured goods, would likely underestimate the time required for effective tool production. The inevitable shortcuts taken due to impatience would result in substandard implements that would fail when needed most. Additionally, many modern humans would struggle with the deep patience required for activities like flint knapping, where a single moment of inattention can ruin hours of careful work. The sophisticated technologies of the Stone Age weren't invented anew by each generation. They represented cumulative knowledge passed down through direct instruction, observation, and practice. This transmission system had several key components. Early exposure. Children observed tool-making from infancy. Play activities often mimicked adult technological processes. Simple tasks were assigned to children as young as 3 or 4. Progressive skill development was structured through age-appropriate activities. Deliberate practice. Skill acquisition through guided repetition. Experienced craftspeople provided feedback and correction. Techniques were refined through thousands of repetitions. Motor skills became increasingly automatic through extensive practice. Conceptual understanding. Knowledge of why techniques worked. Material properties were explained through direct demonstration. Cause and effect relationships were emphasized through controlled observation. Problem-solving approaches were modeled by experienced practitioners. Innovation within tradition, balancing consistency with improvement. Core techniques were maintained with high fidelity. Incremental improvements were incorporated when demonstrated effective. Environmental variations prompted adaptive modifications. This knowledge transmission system ensured that each generation mastered the essential technologies while potentially contributing refinements. The system was robust enough to maintain technological traditions across thousands of years, while flexible enough to adapt to changing conditions. Modern humans, even those with extensive theoretical knowledge, would lack the embedded procedural memories and tacit understanding developed through this lifelong learning process. Without direct instruction from experienced practitioners, contemporary people would be forced to reinvent technologies through trial and error, a prohibitively time-consuming process in a survival situation. The technological sophistication of Stone Age humans presents a profound paradox for modern people. Despite our advanced scientific understanding and complex technological systems, most contemporary humans lack the specific knowledge and skills required to create even the most primitive survival technologies from raw materials. This knowledge gap illustrates a fundamental truth about human technological evolution. Our species' success has always depended on accumulated cultural knowledge rather than individual innovation. The technologies that enabled human survival through millions of years of environmental challenges weren't simple or intuitive. They represented sophisticated adaptations requiring extensive knowledge, practiced skill, and deep understanding of material properties. For a modern human suddenly transported to the Stone Age, the inability to create effective tools would severely limit survival possibilities. Without the accumulated technological knowledge of our ancestors, knowledge largely lost in contemporary societies, even the most educated modern person would struggle to create the basic implements necessary for food procurement, shelter construction, and protection from environmental hazards. In the controlled environments of modern life, shelter is a constant, a background condition we rarely need to actively consider. For Stone Age humans, however, creating effective protection from environmental conditions represented an ongoing challenge, requiring sophisticated knowledge, significant labor investment, and continuous maintenance. Understanding prehistoric shelter strategies reveals another critical skill gap that would threaten modern humans in a Stone Age context. For Stone Age humans, effective shelter served multiple critical functions beyond simple comfort. Thermoregulation, maintaining core body temperature within viable ranges. In cold environments, inadequate shelter could mean death from hypothermia within hours. In hot environments, proper shelter provided essential shade and cooling. Temperature fluctuations between day and night required adaptive shelter strategies. Protection from precipitation, keeping essential items dry, maintaining fire-making materials in usable condition, preventing food spoilage, protecting tools and weapons from weather damage, allowing healing of injuries without constant moisture exposure. Defense against predators, creating secure spaces, physical barriers against large carnivores, elevated structures inaccessible to ground predators, protected sleep locations reducing vulnerability during rest periods, wind protection, reducing convective heat loss. In cold environments, wind exposure could increase heat loss by 25 to 50%. Even moderate breezes significantly impact perceived temperature. Wind-driven precipitation creates additional challenges for maintaining body heat. The archaeological record reveals that shelter strategies evolved alongside other technologies, becoming increasingly sophisticated throughout the Stone Age. This evolution reflected both technological innovation and adaptation to diverse environmental conditions as humans expanded their geographic range. The earliest and most fundamental shelter strategy involved identifying and exploiting natural features that provided environmental protection. This approach required sophisticated landscape reading abilities, cave and rock shelter selection, identifying viable natural formations, assessing structural stability to avoid collapse dangers, evaluating orientation relative to prevailing winds and solar exposure, checking for evidence of seasonal flooding or water seepage, considering proximity to essential resources like water and food sources. Vegetation shelter utilization, using existing plant structures, dense tree canopies for precipitation protection, natural vegetation formations creating wind barriers, root structures of fallen trees providing framework for additional covering, terrain feature exploitation, using landscape elements for protection, south-facing slopes in northern latitudes for maximum solar exposure, natural depressions providing wind protection, elevated positions reducing predation risk and flooding concerns. This natural shelter utilization was far from random or opportunistic. Archaeological evidence reveals consistent patterns in site selection across vast time periods, indicating sophisticated understanding of how landscape features affected microclimate conditions. For modern humans, suddenly placed in unfamiliar terrain, this landscape reading ability would be largely absent. Without understanding how topography affects wind patterns, which rock formations are stable, or how vegetation indicates underlying hydrological conditions, contemporary people would likely select suboptimal or actively dangerous locations for shelter establishment. As technological capabilities advanced, Stone Age humans increasingly supplemented natural shelters with constructed elements, eventually developing fully built environments tailored to specific conditions. This architectural evolution reflected growing technological sophistication. Early Paleolithic, 2.5 million to 200,000 years ago, simple windbreaks, basic constructed barriers, arranged branches and vegetation to block prevailing winds, created minimal but effective protection, required limited material processing, demonstrated basic understanding of how to modify natural airflow. Lean-to structures, angled frameworks supporting covering materials, utilized fallen trees or large branches as primary support, incorporated additional branches to create a framework, added covering materials like large leaves, bark, or animal hides, created effective precipitation barriers with minimal materials. Middle Paleolithic, 300,000 to 50,000 years ago. Post-supported structures, more elaborate frameworks, evidence of deliberately placed support posts, more substantial construction requiring group effort, greater interior space, allowing more activities under shelter. Indications of longer occupation periods at single locations. Composite constructions, combining natural and built elements. Rock shelters enhanced with constructed walls. Cave entrances modified with barriers for improved climate control. Natural depressions enlarged and reinforced to create semi-subterranean dwellings. Upper Paleolithic, 50,000 to 10,000 years ago. Mammoth bone houses, sophisticated dwellings in treeless environments, utilized mammoth bones as structural elements, created substantial circular structures up to 6 meters in diameter, incorporated complex roof systems using additional bones and hides, demonstrated advanced understanding of structural principles. Pit houses, semi-subterranean dwellings, excavated partially below ground level for thermal stability, incorporated sophisticated post and beam structural systems, utilized complex covering techniques including sod layers, demonstrated understanding of Earth's insulating properties, tent-like structures, highly portable shelter systems, utilized lightweight frameworks of wood or bone, incorporated carefully processed coverings of hides or plant materials, demonstrated sophisticated understanding of tension and compression, allowed rapid deployment and dismantling for mobile populations. Archaeological evidence from sites like Terra Amata in France, dated to 380,000 years ago, reveals surprisingly sophisticated shelter construction during the Lower Paleolithic, with evidence of post holes indicating constructed hut-like structures. By the Upper Paleolithic, sites like Dolní Věstonice in the Czech Republic, dated to 27,000 years ago, show evidence of complex dwellings with central hearths, sleeping platforms, and specialized activity areas. For modern humans without specific architectural knowledge, constructing effective shelters would present significant challenges. Material selection. Identifying appropriate construction elements. Which woods offer sufficient strength while remaining workable? What covering materials provide effective weather protection? How to harvest and process materials without damaging their useful properties. Structural principles, understanding basic architectural mechanics. How to create stable frameworks that won't collapse. How to manage load distribution across support elements. Where to position openings without compromising structural integrity. Weather adaptation, tailoring designs to local conditions. Appropriate roof pitches for prevailing precipitation types. Optimal orientations for solar gain or shade. Necessary adaptations for specific threats like heavy snow loads or strong winds. Without this knowledge, modern humans would likely construct ineffective shelters that failed during critical weather events, potentially leading to hypothermia, equipment damage, or injury from structural collapse. Beyond basic weather protection, Stone Age shelter systems demonstrated sophisticated understanding of how to create and maintain favorable microclimates within limited technological constraints. Heat management, controlling internal temperatures, strategic hearth placement for optimal heat distribution. thermal mass incorporation to moderate temperature fluctuations. Insulation layers using materials like grass, leaves, or animal furs. Ventilation control to balance fresh air access with heat retention. Smoke handling, managing fire byproducts. Roof opening placement to create natural draft effects. Wind direction consideration in entrance orientation. Sophisticated understanding of how structure shape affects air movement. Moisture control, managing internal humidity. Floor treatments to minimize ground moisture transfer. Material selection for appropriate moisture absorption or repulsion. Drainage considerations in site selection and preparation. Space organization, optimizing limited protected areas. Activity zoning for different functions. Sleeping area elevation for improved thermal comfort. Storage systems protecting essential items from environmental damage. These microclimate management strategies weren't merely comfort considerations. They directly impacted survival outcomes. In cold environments, the difference between a well-designed shelter with effective heat management and a poorly constructed one could mean the difference between survival and hypothermia during severe weather events. Modern humans, accustomed to passive environmental control through mechanical systems, would likely struggle to create effective microclimate management using only natural materials and physical principles. Without understanding how roof shape affects draft, how material layering impacts insulation value, or how entrance orientation influences internal conditions, contemporary people would create shelters with suboptimal internal environments, potentially leading to hypothermia, heat stress, or chronic discomfort that degrades overall function. Creating effective shelters required sophisticated material processing techniques, transforming raw environmental resources into usable construction elements. Wood processing, preparing structural elements, appropriate tool selection for different cutting tasks, seasoning techniques preventing later warping or splitting, shaping methods for joinery and specialized components, preservation treatments extending material lifespan, covering materials, creating weather barriers, hide processing including scraping, stretching, and smoking, bark harvesting techniques preventing tree damage, grass and reed collection and preparation methods, leaf arrangement for maximum water shedding, binding systems connecting structural elements, cordage production from plant fibers or animal sinew, joinery techniques including notching and mortise and tenon variants, lashing patterns optimized for different structural requirements, natural adhesive preparation from tree resins or animal products, insulation materials creating thermal barriers, appropriate plant material selection and processing, layering techniques for maximum effectiveness, moisture management to maintain insulative properties, application methods preventing settling or compression. These processing techniques represented sophisticated technological systems requiring specific knowledge and practice skill. Archaeological evidence, complemented by ethnographic observations of traditional societies, reveals the complexity of these material preparation methods. Modern humans without this specific processing knowledge would struggle to transform raw materials into effective construction elements. Without understanding proper wood seasoning, hide preparation, or fiber processing, contemporary people would likely create shelter components that failed prematurely, hides that rotted instead of shedding water, structural elements that warped or split under load, or bindings that broke during critical weather events. Stone Age shelter construction wasn't merely a technological challenge. It represented a social enterprise requiring coordination, cooperation, and shared labor. Resource gathering, collecting construction materials, group expeditions to harvest specific resources, division of labor based on physical capabilities and skills, transportation systems for moving heavy materials, coordination to ensure sufficient quantities without overexploitation. Construction processes, building the physical structure, role specialization for different construction tasks, communication systems for coordinating complex activities, leadership structures for decision-making during construction, knowledge transmission ensuring proper techniques, maintenance activities, preserving shelter functionality, regular inspection and repair protocols, group participation in major maintenance events, shared responsibility for critical systems like hearth management, collective response to emergency situations like storm damage. Archaeological evidence from sites like Mashirich in Ukraine, dated to 15,000 years ago, demonstrates the scale of social cooperation involved in prehistoric shelter construction. The mammoth bone houses found at this site required coordinated effort to collect, transport, and assemble hundreds of massive skeletal elements, representing thousands of person-hours of labor. For modern humans accustomed to individualistic approaches and specialized labor systems, the cooperative requirements of Stone Age shelter construction would present social and psychological challenges beyond the technical difficulties. Without established trust relationships, clear communication systems, and practiced cooperation patterns, contemporary people would struggle to coordinate the complex activities necessary for effective shelter creation. Highly mobile hunter-gatherers, groups moving frequently every few days, emphasized portable shelter technologies, developed rapidly deployable structures requiring minimal setup time, created lightweight components that could be transported easily, utilized more natural shelters supplemented with minimal construction. Semi-sedentary populations, seasonal movement patterns, maintained multiple shelter sites in different resource zones, developed structures that could be abandoned and reoccupied, created more substantial constructions at frequently used locations, implemented storage systems at regular occupation sites. Increasingly sedentary groups, late Upper Paleolithic, early Neolithic, invested in substantial structures requiring significant labor, developed specialized architectural features for long-term use, created permanent modifications to local environments, implemented complex maintenance systems for extended structure lifespan. Archaeological evidence reveals this spectrum of mobility-based shelter strategies. Sites like Pinsevent in France, dated to 12,000 years ago, show evidence of lightweight, seasonally occupied structures associated with reindeer hunting, while contemporaneous sites in the Levant reveal more substantial constructions associated with intensive wild plant exploitation. Modern humans, predominantly adapted to sedentary lifestyles, would likely struggle with the mobility-shelter balance required in many Stone Age contexts. Without understanding how to rapidly construct effective temporary shelters, or how to select natural features requiring minimal modification, contemporary people would invest excessive time and energy in construction, potentially compromising other essential survival activities. Perhaps the most critical aspect of Stone Age shelter systems was the narrow margin between success and failure. In harsh environments, shelter inadequacies could prove rapidly fatal. Arctic regions, temperatures below -40 degrees or 40 Fahr. Improper insulation could result in fatal hypothermia within hours. Structural failure during storms could mean immediate death. Inadequate ventilation with interior fires could cause asphyxiation. Improper site selection could lead to burial by drifting snow. Desert environments, extreme heat and aridity, insufficient shade could result in hyperthermia and dehydration. Improper orientation could create uninhabitable interior temperatures. Failure to account for rare precipitation events could lead to flash flooding. Inadequate protection from nocturnal temperature drops could cause hypothermia. Tropical regions, high heat and humidity, poor ventilation could create dangerous heat stress conditions. Inadequate elevation could expose occupants to flooding or ground-dwelling parasites. Insufficient protection from insects could lead to debilitating disease exposure. Improper material selection could result in rapid structural deterioration from mold and rot. These environmental challenges required specific, locale-adapted shelter solutions developed through generations of experience. The archaeological record shows that Stone Age humans successfully created appropriate shelter systems for virtually every terrestrial environment on Earth, from Arctic ice fields to Kalahari deserts. For modern humans, without environment-specific shelter knowledge, the consequences of improvised solutions could be dire. Without understanding the specific requirements of different climatic conditions, contemporary people would likely create shelters inadequate for local environmental extremes, potentially resulting in hypothermia, hyperthermia, or exposure to environmental hazards that could prove quickly fatal. The sophisticated shelter systems developed by Stone Age humans represented far more than simple protection from the elements. They embodied complex technological systems requiring specific knowledge, practice skills, and deep understanding of environmental interactions. From site selection to material processing to structural design, prehistoric shelter construction integrated diverse knowledge domains into practical solutions essential for survival. Modern humans, despite our advanced architectural understanding, would find ourselves at a severe disadvantage if suddenly required to create effective shelters using only natural materials. Without specific knowledge of local resources, processing techniques, and environmental adaptations, contemporary people would likely construct inadequate shelters that failed during critical weather events, potentially leading to hypothermia, exposure injuries, or equipment damage that compromised overall survival chances. This shelter knowledge gap illustrates another critical vulnerability for time-displaced modern humans. While our ancestors carried detailed mental templates for effective shelter construction in specific environments, contemporary people typically lack this practical architectural knowledge, leaving us ill-equipped to meet one of the most fundamental survival needs in a Stone Age context. Of all prehistoric technologies, fire stands alone in its transformative impact on human evolution. More than any other innovation, the controlled use of fire fundamentally altered humanity's relationship with the environment, creating possibilities that would have remained forever inaccessible without this mastery. Yet for modern humans accustomed to push-button ignition and reliable fuel sources, the challenges of fire management in a Stone Age context would present perhaps the most immediate survival threat. The controlled use of fire, beginning at least 400,000 years ago, with some evidence suggesting much earlier dates, revolutionized human existence across multiple dimensions. Extended activity periods, illumination beyond daylight hours, allowed productive work after sunset, created time for social bonding and knowledge transmission, expanded the effective human day by 4 to 6 hours, provided security during vulnerable night hours, expanded dietary options, cooking technologies, detoxified otherwise poisonous plant foods, rendered tough foods digestible through fiber breakdown, killed dangerous parasites in meat, preserved food through smoking and drying, improved nutrient bioavailability, environmental modification, landscape management, created favorable habitats for game animals through controlled burning, stimulated growth of desirable plant species, cleared dense vegetation for improved mobility and visibility, modified local insect populations reducing disease vectors. Technology enablement, manufacturing processes, hardened wooden tools increasing durability, facilitated hafting through heat-softened adhesives, enabled pottery production, late Upper Paleolithic, improved hide processing through smoking. Predator deterrence, security enhancement, kept dangerous animals at bay during vulnerable night hours, created safe zones in predator-rich environments, allowed occupation of otherwise dangerous habitats, served as emergency defense in direct encounters. Climate adaptation, thermal regulation, enabled survival in cold environments otherwise uninhabitable, provided critical warmth during unexpected weather events, allowed clothing and equipment drying, preventing hypothermia, created microclimate bubbles in harsh conditions. Archaeological evidence from sites worldwide demonstrates the central role of fire in prehistoric life. Hearth features appear consistently in habitation sites, often forming the central organizational point around which other activities were arranged. The ubiquity of fire use across diverse human populations indicates its status not as a luxury, but as an absolute necessity for Stone Age survival. For Stone Age humans, fire existed in two fundamental states: already burning, maintained from previous fires, or requiring creation from scratch. While fire maintenance represented the preferred approach, all groups needed fire-starting capabilities for situations where existing flames were lost. These creation techniques required specific knowledge, materials, and skills. Percussion methods, creating sparks through stone striking. Materials required: high iron content stones like pyrite or marcasite, highly combustible tinder like charcloth, certain fungus species, or finely shredded plant fibers. Progressively larger fuel materials for flame development. Technical requirements: precise striking angles generating maximum spark volume. Proper tinder preparation with appropriate dryness and texture. Sheltered conditions preventing spark dispersal. Careful breath control during ember development. Graduated fuel addition preventing flame smothering. Friction methods: generating heat through wood-on-wood friction. Hand drill technique: required specific wood types with appropriate hardness differential. Necessitated precise pressure application while maintaining rotation. Demanded substantial upper body strength and endurance. Needed precisely prepared tinder bundle for ember transfer. Bow drill technique: required constructed bow with appropriate tension. Necessitated bearing block to reduce upper friction. Demanded coordination between bow movement and downward pressure. Needed precisely prepared fireboard with appropriate notching. Fire plow technique: required specific wood types with appropriate grain properties. Necessitated continuous motion maintaining optimum pressure. Demanded significant physical exertion over extended period. Needed careful ember collection and transfer system. Experimental archaeology has demonstrated the significant skill requirements for prehistoric fire-starting methods. Even experienced practitioners may need 10 to 20 minutes of sustained effort to create fire using friction methods under ideal conditions. For novices, success rates are exceptionally low without direct instruction and supervised practice. Nari demonstrates this expertise as she prepares to create fire after her band's arrival at a new camp. She has carried a small container of carefully prepared tinder, charred cloth created during their previous fire. From her toolkit, she removes a piece of iron pyrite and a flint striker, materials collected during previous travels and carefully protected from moisture. Finding a sheltered position blocking the light breeze, she strikes the stones together at a precise angle, directing the resulting sparks onto the char cloth. When a spark successfully catches, creating a tiny glowing ember, she transfers this precious beginning to a prepared tinder bundle of shredded bark and dried grass. Cupping the bundle in her hands, she blows gently, gradually increasing the oxygen while carefully monitoring the growing coal. When the tinder bundle bursts into flame, she methodically adds progressively larger fuel pieces, building the fire slowly and deliberately. The entire process, representing years of practiced skill, takes less than 5 minutes from start to sustainable flame. For modern humans suddenly placed in a Stone Age context, fire creation would present an immediate and potentially insurmountable challenge. Without specific knowledge of appropriate materials, practiced technical skills, and physical conditioning for sustained effort, contemporary people would likely fail repeatedly at fire-starting attempts. This failure would have cascading consequences for food preparation, warmth protection, and tool manufacturing, quickly creating a survival crisis. For Stone Age humans, maintaining existing fire typically proved far more efficient than creating new flame. This maintenance strategy required sophisticated knowledge and continuous attention. Fuel management, maintaining appropriate combustion, knowledge of different wood types and their burning properties, understanding of how to create different flame types for various purposes, awareness of sustainable collection practices ensuring continuous supply, processing techniques creating appropriately sized fuel for different needs, environmental adaptation, adjusting fire techniques to conditions, protecting flames during precipitation events, creating wind barriers in exposed locations, adapting fuel types to available resources, modifying fire structures based on immediate needs. Transportation systems, moving fire between locations, slow-burning materials for long-distance fire carrying, protective containers preventing accidental spread, ember preservation techniques during overnight periods, methods for rapidly rebuilding from minimal preserved coals. Risk management, controlling fire's destructive potential, containment strategies preventing wildfire spread, monitoring systems during sleep periods, emergency response techniques for escaped flames, adaptation to high-risk conditions like drought or high winds. Archaeological and ethnographic evidence reveals the sophisticated nature of these fire maintenance systems. Many hunter-gatherer groups maintain specific social roles centered on fire maintenance, with dedicated individuals responsible for ensuring flames remained viable. The universal nature of these practices across diverse cultures indicates their critical survival importance. For modern humans accustomed to on-demand flame, the constant vigilance required for Stone Age fire maintenance would represent a significant psychological and practical challenge. Without understanding appropriate fuel selection, processing techniques, or preservation methods, contemporary people would likely experience frequent fire loss, necessitating repeated creation attempts with their associated energy expenditure and high failure rates. Beyond basic warmth and light, Stone Age humans developed sophisticated applications, leveraging fire's transformative properties across multiple domains. Food technologies, cooking methods, different techniques for various foods, direct flame exposure for rapid cooking and exterior char, coal cooking for sustained moderate heat, ash baking for slow, even cooking, stone boiling using heated rocks in containers, smoking for preservation and flavor development, food preservation, extending usable life of resources, smoke preservation, inhibiting bacterial growth, dehydration through controlled heat exposure, combination methods creating stable storage products, cooking to inactivate enzymatic spoilage processes, material processing, wood modification, improving structural properties, fire hardening spear points for increased penetration, controlled burning for hollow container creation, heat bending for curved components, smoke treatment for pest resistance, stone tool production, enhancing manufacturing processes, heat treatment, improving flaking properties of certain stone types, controlled thermal shock for initial material reduction, pitch extraction from heated tree resins for adhesives, material testing revealing internal flaws before investment of labor. Environmental management, landscape modification, creating favorable conditions, controlled burning, promoting desired plant species, habitat creation for target animal populations, travel corridor establishment through dense vegetation, insect population management, reducing disease vectors, defensive applications, security enhancement, smoke production, repelling biting insects, area clearing, improving visibility around settlements, nighttime perimeter establishment, deterring predators, emergency signal systems for coordinating group response. These diverse applications represented sophisticated technological systems requiring specific knowledge and practiced skill. Archaeological evidence from sites worldwide demonstrates the universal importance of these fire-based technologies across different environments and cultural traditions. For modern humans, without this specialized knowledge, many critical survival applications of fire would remain inaccessible. Without understanding heat treatment processes, cooking techniques appropriate for different foods, or proper preservation methods, contemporary people would fail to leverage fire's full potential, significantly reducing their survival prospects in a Stone Age context. Beyond its technological applications, fire played a fundamental social role in Stone Age societies, serving as the central organizing feature around which community life revolved. Knowledge transmission focal point, educational center, evening storytelling transmitting cultural information, skill demonstration in optimal lighting conditions, multi-generational gathering, enabling elder teaching, shared attention focus facilitating group learning, social bonding location, relationship reinforcement, communal food sharing strengthening group cohesion, collective problem solving during evening discussions, conflict resolution in neutral community space, performance traditions building shared identity, spiritual and ritual center, cosmological connections, fire-centered ceremonies marking life transitions, symbolic purification through flame, transcendent experiences through flame watching, connections to ancestors through eternal flame concepts. Archaeological evidence consistently shows hearth features as the central organizing element in Stone Age habitation sites. The spatial arrangement of activities around fire reveals its role not merely as a technological resource, but as the heart of social life. Ethnographic studies of recent hunter-gatherer societies confirm this pattern, with the fire circle serving as the primary venue for social interaction, education, and community decision-making. This social dimension of fire would be easily overlooked by modern humans, focused primarily on fire's practical applications. Without recognizing the critical community-building function of the evening fire, contemporary people might fail to develop the social bonds and knowledge-sharing systems essential for group survival in challenging environments. Stone Age humans developed sophisticated understanding of fire's role in ecological systems, creating mutually beneficial relationships between human fire use and environmental processes. Adaptive firing regimes, landscape management, timing burns to maximize desirable plant responses, creating mosaic patterns supporting diverse species, maintaining fire-dependent ecosystems through regular burning, preventing catastrophic wildfires through controlled burning, resource enhancement, productivity improvement, stimulating fruit and seed production in fire-adapted plants, creating favorable browsing conditions attracting game, enhancing soil fertility through ash deposition, managing competing vegetation around valuable resources, risk reduction, mitigating environmental threats, reducing fuel loads near habitation areas, creating fire breaks protecting valued resources, modifying undergrowth harboring dangerous animals, improving visibility, reducing predation risk. Archaeological and paleoecological evidence increasingly suggests that human fire use has shaped ecosystems for hundreds of thousands of years. Many environments long considered natural actually represent the product of millennia of human-fire interaction, with species compositions and distributions reflecting ancient management practices. Modern humans, often viewing fire primarily as a destructive force requiring containment, would likely miss these sophisticated ecological applications. Without understanding fire's role in maintaining healthy ecosystems, contemporary people might either avoid beneficial burning or apply fire inappropriately, potentially damaging the very environmental systems they depend upon for survival. The mastery of fire represents perhaps humanity's most significant technological achievement, the innovation that enabled countless subsequent developments. For Stone Age humans, fire wasn't merely a convenience, but an essential survival technology integrated into every aspect of daily life. From creation and maintenance to diverse applications across technological, social, and ecological domains, fire management required sophisticated knowledge systems and practice skills. For modern humans suddenly placed in a Stone Age context, the fire knowledge gap would present perhaps the most immediate survival threat. Without the ability to reliably create, maintain, and effectively use fire, contemporary people would face cascading challenges affecting food safety, thermal regulation, predator defense, and technological production. This fundamental deficit would severely compromise survival prospects, even if other adaptation challenges could be overcome. The fire knowledge gap illustrates a profound truth about human technological dependence. We have become so removed from the foundational technologies that enabled our species' success that we can no longer effectively create or maintain them without specialized training. This disconnection from our technological roots represents perhaps the most significant vulnerability for modern humans in a survival situation. The human body that evolved during the Stone Age and the modern human body inhabiting today's world are genetically nearly identical, yet functionally worlds apart. Understanding the physical condition of prehistoric humans helps explain why contemporary people would struggle to meet the basic physical demands of Stone Age life. For Stone Age humans, physical activity wasn't exercise, it was existence. Daily life required constant movement across multiple domains. Food procurement, gathering and hunting activities, walking 5 to 10 miles daily while foraging, sustained running during persistence hunting, digging for underground plant foods, climbing for fruit and honey collection, carrying heavy loads of gathered resources, material collection, resource acquisition, traveling to specific stone sources, harvesting and transporting wood, collecting and carrying water, mining clay for pottery, later periods, gathering construction materials, processing activities, material transformation, grinding seeds and nuts, pounding plant fibers, scraping hides, knapping stone tools, weaving plant materials. This constant physical engagement created bodies fundamentally different from those of modern humans. Skeletal remains from the Paleolithic reveal distinctive features reflecting this lifestyle. Robust muscle attachment points, larger processes and ridges on bones where muscles attached, indicating greater muscle mass and strength. Thick cortical bone. The dense outer layer of bones was substantially thicker than in modern humans. Pronounced sexual dimorphism. Greater physical differences between males and females than in contemporary populations. Evidence of specific activity patterns. Skeletal markers indicating regular performance of particular movements. Anatomically modern humans emerged approximately 300,000 years ago, with bodies explicitly adapted for this active lifestyle. Our basic physiology, cardiovascular system, musculoskeletal structure, metabolic processes, evolved in contexts requiring constant physical exertion. This evolutionary history remains embedded in our biology, even as our lifestyle has dramatically changed. For modern humans suddenly placed in a Stone Age context, the sheer physical demands of daily existence would prove immediately challenging. Studies of contemporary urban dwellers show that the average person takes 4,000 to 6,000 steps daily, far below the 15,000 to 20,000 typical for hunter-gatherers. This activity deficit would manifest as rapid fatigue, increased injury risk, and inability to complete essential survival tasks. Beyond the general activity levels, Stone Age humans developed specific physical adaptations through lifetime exposure to particular movement patterns. Foot structure. Natural walking adaptations. Calloused soles providing protection without restrictive footwear. Wider foot spread, improving balance and stability. Stronger intrinsic foot muscles supporting natural arch. Neural adaptations enhancing proprioception and terrain sensitivity. Grip strength, manual dexterity and power. Hypertrophied forearm muscles from tool use. Thickened finger bones from constant material manipulation. Calloused hands resistant to abrasion and pressure. Neural patterns optimizing force application. Spinal conditioning, back strength and resilience. Balanced muscle development supporting proper alignment. Practiced movement patterns minimizing injury risk. Proportional strength between opposing muscle groups. Habitual proper biomechanics during lifting and carrying. Joint conditioning, articular surface adaptation. Thickened cartilage responding to regular use. Surrounding muscle development protecting joint structures. Neural patterns selecting optimal movement paths. Progressive loading building tissue resilience. These adaptations began in childhood, with Stone Age children engaging in physically demanding activities from their earliest years. By adolescence, these young people had already accumulated a decade of progressive physical conditioning, creating bodies specifically adapted to the demands of their environment. For modern humans, these lifetime adaptations are largely absent. Contemporary lifestyles, characterized by supportive footwear, minimal carrying demands, and limited manual manipulation, fail to develop the specific physical capabilities required for Stone Age survival. This conditioning deficit would manifest as rapid onset of problems including blisters, sprains, strains, and overuse injuries when suddenly exposed to prehistoric activity demands. Stone Age humans lived with unpredictable energy intake, experiencing both feast and famine as normal conditions. This energy fluctuation created metabolic adaptations significantly different from modern patterns. Metabolic flexibility, shifting between energy substrates, efficient fat utilization during carbohydrate scarcity, smooth transitions between metabolic states, ketosis tolerance during extended food limitation, glycogen supercompensation during abundance, hunger tolerance, functional capability despite food scarcity. Maintained cognitive performance during fasting, regulated energy expenditure preserving critical functions, normalized hunger sensations without psychological distress, preserved muscle tissue during caloric restriction, efficient energy utilization, maximizing available resources, optimized movement patterns requiring minimal energy, selective task prioritization during scarcity, circadian alignment reducing unnecessary energy expenditure, appropriate energy investment based on resource availability. These metabolic adaptations weren't merely physiological, they incorporated psychological components, allowing normal function despite conditions modern humans would find intolerable. The integration of physical and mental adaptations created resilient systems capable of maintaining performance through challenging circumstances. Modern humans, accustomed to regular meals and constant energy availability, typically lack these metabolic adaptations. When faced with involuntary fasting, contemporary people often experience hypoglycemic symptoms, cognitive impairment, emotional distress, and physical performance decrements. This metabolic rigidity would severely compromise survival capabilities in a Stone Age context where regular meals couldn't be guaranteed.